We are on our way to Bilgram, a small town in Hardoi district of Uttar Pradesh. Bilgram has been a rich center of refined culture and literature, producing several scholars, poets, as well as administrators. An integral part of every facet of life in Bilgram is the memory of the Battle of Karbala, which the migrants from Wasit brought along. This tragic incident is mourned by a large number of Muslims, especially the Shi'as all over the world. In this film, we try to record one such Ashura of Muharram in Bilgram. In the Imam Baras, or the houses of mourning, the epic of Karbala is recited in various poetic forms such as Marsiya and Noha, describing the martyrdom of Imam Hussain and his followers that included men and women. The procession is also joined by the Hindu residents of Bilgram, who tie threads of mannat or holy vows. The babies too are blessed by touching the flag.
अली को खालिके अकबर की ऐन कहते हैं, हसन को कल्ब रिसालत का चैन कहते हैं। बचा के दीन खुदा जो खुदा की लाज रखे, दोबारे इश्क में उसको हुसैन कहते हैं। या हुसैन, 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 या
Back in the family Imambara, women from the neighborhood are busy in a private majlis.
मुहर्रम तो बहुत कसके होते थे, अब वो मियाँ लोग तो हैं ही नहीं, मगर आओ तो बहुत दूर दूर से। जितने यहाँ के आदमी हैं वो बाहर हैं, जैसे वो राइट जब नखलऊ साउथ को बाहर रहा वो आओ इमामबाड़ा तो बहुत बढ़िया बनवाई दी।
And now it's time for the large Tazia to go for its final journey of this year. This would be the biggest and most conclusive event of the Ashura, to be witnessed by thousands of men and women from Bilgram and outside.
Azad Bilgrami and other scholars like this, I felt that they were a little bit hovering in the background of this film, and I wonder how they could be brought in. To a large extent, choosing, although as Zara says, this film has some resonances with my classes. Choosing a Sunni Punjabi to comment on this film is it's a little bit removed from my identity, and so I was really hoping to have Professor Rula Abisaab here to speak alongside me. She's had some some medical issues, and so she couldn't make it. But as I was watching this film, I was strongly reminded of a film about Punjab by the filmmaker now in Vancouver, Ajay Bhardwaj, and the film is called Milange Babe Ratan de Melete. Let's meet at Baba Ratan's Mela, which is about the traces of Islam, and to some extent the presence of Islam without Muslims in Indian Punjab. And it was interesting to contrast that film with this film, which is about, very much about the presence of especially Shi'i Islam, but various forms of Islam in India. To some extent, I have a lot of comments, I could go on forever, but to some extent I wondered about to what extent the film performs or doesn't perform mourning itself, right? To a large extent it is a celebratory film. But on the other hand, again, this Buzurg who shows up in the middle of the film does perform a kind of mourning, and the film implicitly draws attention by the fact of celebrating Bilgram, implicitly draws attention to the situation elsewhere in India. So I wonder if we could think about that. I'm also very interested in, sorry, and this will be my last comment. I'm also very interested in the moments of a break from mourning. So these scenes in which there are children playing, gaily colored costumes and so on. The moment in which one of the participants in one of the rituals is yawning, for example, right? Just to bring it back to our reality, I'm teaching a course with 100 students this term, and somehow many of them are dealing with death in their own families, and some of them are coming to me and talking to me about it, and it strikes me that mourning in where we are is a very lonely process. What we see in this film is a communal mourning, which is very different and which plays itself out in very different ways from what we see here. So I wonder if we could talk about that. And before we get to a discussion about all this, I wonder if Zara could give us a sense of her motivation for choosing this film, because it's really her choice. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Zara?
Thank you so much for this great comment, Khan. If you'd like to sit here, we could maybe take a questions together later. So the motivation was basically just this, that at our institute we have a lot of resources and projects on Shi'i Islam, and we have lots of courses on Safavid history, etc. And it would be I thought it would be very interesting to see the differences in mourning culture. It was very interesting for me always to see. And also the idea that to what extent, we were hoping to explore it, Professor Abisaab is not here, to what extent these things in India might be inherited from the kind of mourning culture that developed in Safavid Iran, under the Safavids. And to what extent it is related, because of course most mourning culture in South Asia, within South Asia of course it's very different as well. In Pakhtunkhwa it's very different from Punjab, and Punjab is slightly different from UP, so these things are there. But Lucknow is really considered, because Lucknow was a place under the Awadh dynasty, Nawabs of Awadh. They were themselves from Iran and they were a Shia family. Lucknow was really a place where became a kind of probably one of the more prominent Shi'i states, kingdoms after the Safavid kingdom itself. And the various forms of poetry related to mourning, and I've heard, I'm not completely sure, that the various, around 5 or 6 genres of poetry that are just in Urdu, which are just specific to Muharram mourning. And that might perhaps be one of the perhaps not even Persian or Arabic have these many forms. That's what I've heard. And the way the Marsiya takes on in Urdu, it's very, very prominent. And it affects apparently even the poetry of Iqbal later on, the things in the Marsiya. So yes, it was very interesting to see. I would have been really interested to see to what extent those are inheritances or not, and the differences there. So yeah, and if anyone has any comments related to that, that would be really interesting as well.
I was also thinking about the possibility of inheritance from Safavi Iran, but you know what struck me was the similarity of so many of these rituals to Sufi rituals that are local to the area. So you know, I just wanted to bring this up. That of course, you know, Professor Abisaab would have been a much better place to talk about the possibility of transfer. But I'm also curious about the kind of localization that people might be seeing here.
So my idea also is that that perhaps there's not so much of cultural transfer there as one might assume. And these things are fairly localized, and even the tazia, we know that in Iran that it's actually a play, like a theatrical fashion play, and with people you know, dressed up as you know, Ali Asghar or Imam Hussein with you know, but in South Asia, the effigy of the mausoleum at Karbala actually is called, the effigy itself is called the tazia. And the theatre, I don't think I've ever seen anything, any kind of theatre around this. There's recitation. Within poetry, there's like whatever theatre that there's there, but people, role play, I haven't really seen that. The kind of role play that we have seen in Iran, like I've been to the palaces in Tehran, and they actually have paper mache, I think, effigies of various characters in the Karbala story, but I don't think I've seen that kind of thing in South Asia at all. So thank you. Yeah. Anyone has any questions? Or comments even?
Hello. I am from Lucknow. So I can talk about Muharram very easily because there are taziyas that are made of practically everything you can think of. There is a special tazia made with matched texts only. And there are parts of communities which do that, you know, and they are Hindus also. But as to Professor Pasha's comment about that line about communal harmony or having no sectarian problem, that was clearly an afterthought. That was not the part of the thing, because this film has been funded by Indira Gandhi Pratishthan, and they would have wanted to have something like that. So I don't think that was in the original idea of the film, but it was a shot afterwards, as one can see very easily, and added later on. And the third thing is that the nohas or the sohs that you sing are not in Urdu all the time. They are in Avdi also, which is a traditional language of Awadh, and it is neither Hindi or nor Urdu. It hardly has any Urdu or Farsi or Arabic words. Well, that's about it.
I'll try with a mic, maybe I'll do without a mic, we'll see. Yeah, so I grew up in a pretty Shiite Iraqi family, and our mosque was pretty much 50-50 South Asian and Arabic. And so during Muharram there'd be two programs. There'd be one that was in Urdu for the South Asian community, and one for Arabic that was downstairs. And then at the end there'd be an English lecture for both. So we'd split up for our respective Urdu and Arabic programs, then meet back up for English, and there'd be two dinners, one that was not spicy, one that was really spicy. So I had a great choice of if I wanted to listen to Urdu, if I wanted to listen to Arabic, if I wanted to eat spicy or not spicy. It broke down in my favor. And it also enabled me to see how two different cultures engage with the same mourning in the same stories. And this film was, as you said, Professor, remarkably rich, and there was so much in there, so many questions that it brought up to me, so many observations. Obviously, there's not enough time to go through it in full detail. But the topics you guys brought up, I really good. I have things I wanted to add. The first one being about looking at whether these rituals, tracing them and seeing to what degree there's some pre-Islamic rituals that are still there. So for example, like all the different elements of the chest beating, the noha, the alam, the ta'ziyah, the focus on the horse, the jinah, the fire walking, the tabut, the processional, so all these elements, seeing if those are type of Iranian, or if they're Arabic, or if they're some pre-Islamic things that get mixed in, seeing how did people mourn, what is the history of the mourning rituals in the Islamic world. That's really, really cool. I mean, sounds very fascinating to see what we could find. Another one that ties in is the literary aspect. So these poems, they're not all entirely always in Urdu. So there's some that are Persian, and I wonder, because from what I've managed to gather, Islamic scholars say that Urdu is a relatively recent language, so it would have been Persian or Arabic to see what were they written in, how did they transmit it, how much of them are Iranian in origin or Arabic in origin, to see, tracing the literature of it. And then talking about Professor, the mourning, so the notice of the breaks in the morning. You said people were like, there was yawning, there was some laughter, and that tying back into the nature of mourning, the activity of mourning, and comparing different types of mourning. So one interesting thing is that I remember I'd be in the majlis, and I had like my father who's next to me who's like bawling, and I'm not used to having my father bawling next to me. But it wouldn't have been appropriate to give him a hug. Like, people are crying together, but they're not hugging each other during or afterwards. Whereas if you're mourning the death of a loved one, or in other cases of mourning, we tend to hug each other, touch each other. But in the Muharram mourning, it's that loneliness aspect. You are quite alone. No one's there to pat your back, even though you're right next to each other. But then afterwards, as if when we're eating, everyone's cheering for the chai is flowing. There's chatter happening. There's people you don't see all year except for during Muharram. So it's that aspect also comes up. So it's quite fascinating. And then finally, I feel like the film, and this is a new one, a new notion. The film talked about kind of the effects of Muharram on Bilgrams, kind of how life goes back after Muharram to its usual problems and its usual issues. And I thought it was kind of the film seemed to be suggesting that perhaps Muharram could be used, could be something that would put this place on the map in a certain way to raise awareness. For example, in Iraq right now, the Haram of Abbas has their own brand. They sell like ketchup and mayonnaise and wind cleaning products. So like the Shiites in Iraq, they'll purchase these products in the name of Hussein or Abbas, and will donate some money to the program. And that's been used for like blood drives and mobile clinics and like water sanitation plants. I'm wondering if you know anything about those efforts, the use of Karbala as a political rallying, community organizing, and even in politics. For example, Hezbollah will use the Husseini rhetoric when they're talking about Israelis. This is the Dhulm and Mazlum. So Palestinians kind of become Hussein, and they become the family of Karbala. And so this notion of like the use of the Husseini banner for other causes besides just these particular, religious ones. I hope that wasn't too long, because there's so many comments. It's such a rich film.
Yeah. So, hello. So I'll comment very briefly on this excellent set of comments, and I'll just comment on what I know. Number one, the Marsiya, the lament for the martyrs of Karbala, is very much an Indian thing, right? Of course, one has this tradition of ritha in Arabic, including in pre-Islamic Arabian Peninsula. But the Marsiya, as far as we can see, is a very localized South Asian genre, which has a very local history. I was, this. When I was talking about mourning, actually, I was thinking about the loneliness of mourning here, as opposed to in the context that's shown by the film. And so, I was very interested by the sense that you have of a loneliness in communal mourning. And I would have loved to, or I would love to hear more from you about that, because one imagines that that community breeds a kind of a fellow feeling, and a kind of non-repression, but perhaps that's not the case. In terms of, I'm trying to think. Oh, you brought up the issue of this place, Bilgram, coming to life, as they said at the end of the film, for a little while during these festivities, and that this makes me think that, of course, the film doesn't bring out as much as it could explicitly the economic importance of this kind of ritual to the city, and perhaps to the region. In fact, I'm going to leave it there. I don't, not being someone who works on the modern period, I don't know about modern invocations of the martyrs of Karbala in Indian politics. Maybe Zara could tell us about that. But selling window cleaners, I hope not.
Thank you for those great questions. And so yeah, as far as pre-Islamic is concerned, I think that's, of course, that can speculate. It's been so long since many of these rituals have been in place. But certainly, I used to think that many of the Muharram rituals in South Asia are much more local. But when I encountered, I saw some videos later on of things in Iraq and etc. So I realized that, because the Salafi movement in South Asia would have you believe that you're doing everything which is everything is from Hinduism, and you're really astray, and all because Salafis have a particular point of view. But then when you look at Arab countries, and you realize that it's not just working according to what Salafis say, and they have lots of rituals as well. But as far as South Asia is concerned, and you talked about languages, Persian and all of these languages in Mourning. Apparently, it starts from Hussein Bai's Kashafi, and many of these things, Persian in general, many of the things which are very Persian in South Asia are coming from Iran, or are actually coming from Central Asia, where Persian was also a very big language there. So, and previously apparently all the majalis, all of these reciting used to be in Persian, and later on local languages copied those traditions, and that's how it began. So as far as Mourning is concerned, very interesting comment, like the discussion that you and Professor Pasha were having. So just something a little autobiographical about myself. My name is Zahra Sabri, and everyone does assume I'm Shia for some reason, I don't know why. Because of the name Zahra perhaps, and even because I love to go to Muharram gatherings, I think many people in my family also know that I'm no longer Hanafi, but I am. Anyway, so yeah, in my family, before partition, I know that my ancestral home is in India. Muharram was really in the small towns and villages, Muharram was a big occasion, and as Hanafis, we were very much involved in it, and even the house had a special room to house the tazia every year, take it out on Muharram, because you need to store it, it's quite big. So we had that, and we had also a special area in the house, a kind of like a special mourning auditorium made on the lands in our. And you also asked about effects on small towns. What in this film it was hinted at, but it wasn't completely expressed, that the mourning is also for partition, and all those Muslim families who were more elite who have moved to Pakistan. And in a city like Karachi, which I personally think now probably has the most glamorous of all the Muharram activities, and all of South Asia perhaps in some ways, in the literary level and everything. These people who came from India, from small towns, they have their own little societies, like the Sadat-e-Amroha, the Sayyids of Amroha, it's other town. They have their own gatherings, so you go to that one, then you go to the one in Bilgram. So they've carried it all forward. And if some people come from Lucknow or Bilgram, especially, money is sent to invite people all over, from all over these places. So that's a special occasion. And of course, these days, the diasporic, like Amar Nakshwani in England, English speaking, because lots of people in Pakistan, young people are English speaking. A lot of these really hip English speaking zakirs are called from England, etc. And it's very odd, like it's for us to hear what they have to say because it's very different. But apparently, it's supposed to appeal to the younger people. So yeah, that's about that. As far as mourning is concerned, I didn't learn to mourn because the tradition of mourning, Muharram mourning, had broken in my family. So I didn't learn to mourn as a child, but I learned to mourn when I went as a teenager to these lots of Shia friends, their occasions, and I realized that for them it was easier because they were so used to it. So they would mourn, they would readily weep. They wouldn't weep at their own relatives' funerals in front of everybody, but over here, because it's a ritual, they will readily weep and then they'll be okay. But for me, I could weep about all these incidents in my room, hearing all these things, but I couldn't do it in front of other people because I'm not used to doing it. So it would be really hard because, if you're trying not to, like if you are upset and it really builds in your head, so it would be very difficult for me to climb down. But for my friends, I think it was fairly easy. From one Muharram gathering to another. So, and sort of social things happen here as well, because, all the girls are looking very simple, wearing black and looking very beautiful, and no makeup in Muharram. So it's a time for aunties to go looking for girls for their sons, it's a social gathering. So I even have heard incidents where, in a gathering everyone is crying, and then now there's a time to finally do the matam, we say in Urdu, but I think it's latmiya in Arabic. And so someone turned around and asked my friend, who is your mother? So we can send a proposal. So my friend was just like, can we just wait till this is over? So I'm just saying it's not that it's not sincere, but it becomes like a ritual and it becomes more social and it's not the same as regular mourning at times, And if it is I know I have had friends criticized by their mothers for really crying in a very bad way and looking really, really, really depressed in Muharram when all the other girls are looking nicer. So that kind of thing. So yeah, and as far as products and the invocation of Muharram is concerned, so it's in Pakistan, interestingly, even though there's been so much in the past 20 years persecution of Shias because of security situation in general, but Shias are very, very prominent families because they used to be elite families from back in the day, very well represented. So in politics, etc., actually the founder of the country is also Jinnah, Muhammad Ali Jinnah is also from a Shia family, which is really an interesting thing. Of course, he didn't necessarily highlight that part of his identity too much in politics, but it is interesting because for Shias to say, look, the founder of the country was Shia, so you better take care of how we are treated here. And even the families of the Bhuttos, there's a lot of Shia intermarriage, and they are it's not clear, but it may be that they are also Shia. And so generally, the theme of Karbala is invoked again and again in politics or any occasion. For example, I know that the theme of the Rida is so prominent. It's become set in your mind for that the Prophet's household, which is really special. But when Yazid's army came, they were manhandling them so much that these women who are always so careful about not appearing before others and of their veiling, their veils were ripped from their head and their hair was exposed, which is considered like the worst thing, ever. So if for example, the police ends up manhandling female activists, and the veils are, so always look, this is that image comes immediately to your head that this is what happened in Karbala. So at any injustice, the theme of Karbala can always be invoked, and it's often invoked in politics by Sunnis, Shias, everybody, and in completely prosaic things, even when you have no real axe to grind, you will invoke Karbala, So that's the short answer. Thank you. Do we have time for one or two more questions?
Yeah, just to add up to your points on political meanings of Karbala and Taziyah, it's actually a very prime example is the Iranian Revolution. Leading to that process, the martyrdom of Hussein became the symbol of the revolution itself. Intellectuals like Ali Shariati or the leader of the revolution, Ayatollah Khomeini, constantly brought up the images, the Taziyah percussions of the summer of 1978 was actually the peak of the revolutionary upheaval. And so, yeah, in that regard, it was actually these events that made even people like Michel Foucault to fall in love with the Iranian Revolution, to, you know, seeing the emotional visualization and performances of the revolutionary upheaval.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't have one if no one else does. My question is more related to the fact that this is mourning and a form of commemoration, but at the same time, what is striking is the aspect of surprise and anticipation in the scenes. You know, and some scenes are more striking, like the sand, clay turning red, and even though people know that this is going to be happening because they've done it so many times, there's still this kind of future-orientedness where we don't know what will happen until it happens, and then it's a big surprise kind of thing. And so it not only is looking on the past, but there is a future orientation to this form, and it's not just the little things like, oh, is the clay going to turn red, but it's also a suspensefulness regarding a larger future, I would say. But I don't know if the term suspense is the right way to describe this poetic form, and if you have another idea of, you know, another term that, in terms of rhetoric or poetics, that could capture this sense of the future.
That's extremely interesting, Miguel. Thank you so much for this comment. I don't know. You know, I was, like most of us, thinking mainly in terms of the past. You know, I was thinking of this old man and his melancholia, right, for the past, and not so much about the future. But you're absolutely right that this kind of thing would happen every year. And so, you know, what is the you know, is there a is the surprise, is the wonder, you know, the tajub performative, and, you know, is it or is it worthwhile at all to distinguish between a fake performativity and a real wonder? I mean, you know, in terms of the terminology that I would use, it would really be the terminology of tajub, of wonder at a site that is, you know, outside of the ordinary, outside of custom, of adat, the kharqul adat, that which breaks with custom. You know, and your question is far too provocative, Mika, because, you know, even when we talk about adat of custom adat, you know, for the Arabic speakers, what it refers to is something that occurs regularly. So one of the things that you're pointing out is that this is something that occurs regularly. Right? So what do we do with that? I'm not sure, but I'm going to think about that. Thank you. So we're going to end here.